I didn't know exactly how I was going to start today's video. I was initially thinking about beginning with how this game brought video games back on the map in the 80s, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I should instead just explain why. Why, after all the games I've been through so far, am I reviewing the OG Super Mario Bros.?
Because whenever it is summertime, that is when I'm typically in the mood to play some Mario and talk about some Mario. Super Mario is honestly my favorite video game franchise of all time, or at least top 3. This is a franchise that means a lot to me, and so, for every summer of every year, on this very channel, will be dedicated to Mario. It is going to be an occasion that I'm going to call Super Mario Summer. Now before we get started, I think it is very important for me to make a few things clear. I'm not trying to rip off Ant Dude's Mayrio month. Super Mario Summer is an idea that I've had for years, even before this channel was created. I was instead inspired by Doug Walker's Disney-cember, but instead of it being 1 month, it will be a season. I intended to start this on July 16th, but I needed to finish the previous video. So we're starting this year's Super Mario Summer mighty late. So from July 16th to August 31st of every year, I will be covering every single mainline Super Mario game in an episode of Take It or Leave It. So, with all that said and done, let's finally get fucking started. Welcome everyone to...
Back in the 80s, Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Takuza, my Japanese pronunciations are just as bad as ever, ended up making 2 games for the brand new Famicom, aka Nintendo Entertainment System, those being Excitebike and Devil World. For their next game, they wanted to combine the sprite quality from Devil World and the scrolling in Excitebike, basically taking all of the technical expertise that they've learned and combining all of that into a brand new experience. In short, they wanted to break brand new ground in gaming. After all, the crash did happen like a year prior, so it would undoubtedly be a gaming company's best interest to try and bring consumers back. The NES was already out for about a year, so it would have been best to try and come out with high quality games at launch, especially for when it reached America. And fortunately, Nintendo succeeded with their goal. The NES ended up being one of the best-selling consoles of all time, and Super Mario Bros. Was released on the Famicom in Japan in September 13th, 1985, and later released in America on the NES on October 18th of that same year.
And to this day, some still claim that this is one of the greatest games ever for what it did for the industry. So in this video, I will talk about whether or not this game holds up. I will not be comparing this to anything that was made like generations later, because that's just fucking unfair. So I will try to be as fair towards this game as I can. Don't expect me to hold back with criticisms though. I'm gonna judge this game solely on its own and keep the NES's hardware in mind. So let's dress into our plumbing attire and jump over to Super Mario Bros.
The story in the original Super Mario Bros. Is a video game story known by everyone at this point. Bowser kidnaps Princess Peach, go save her. Which means that what we have yet again is...
A damsel in distress story!
This story is told by the game's manual, and there are some interesting lesser-known details about the story in this game, like how they actually say that Peach is the daughter of a Mushroom King, Peach's original name is Princess Toadstool, the Toads are just called the Mushroom People, and Bowser is called the Great Koopa Turtle King.
Jesus Christ, that name is awful.
But then we have the detail that commits full-on ludonarrative dissonance, that being the manual telling you that the Toads were turned into bricks. Huh.
All you have to do is watch a few seconds of the game itself and realize why this makes the player look like they're committing mass fucking genocide.
Now, I will be truthful, I highly doubt that this was the intent. I mean, if they really wanted to make a game where you commit genocide, then they might as well would have made the Adolf Hitler game. I personally believe that this was just a mistranslation issue. After all, if there's anything RE1 Original taught us, this wouldn't have been uncommon. At the same time, though, How the fuck did they not notice this in the first place? All you have to do is take a glance at the gameplay and realize that this would have made our favorite plumber look bad. But at the end of the day, who really cares about the story? No matter how confusing, it's an NES game, and they clearly just wanted to give the player a reason to somewhat care about the world in order to care enough to start playing, and that's completely fine. Now let's jump into how this game feels to control. But before I do so, I need to explain that, just like every other game that I've reviewed, I used an emulator to play this game. The reason why I'm saying this is to explain why there are going to be save state message notifications on the bottom left corner of the cropped footage. I'm telling you this to avoid comments from people who noticed. Got it? Good.
And yes, I've used save states to beat this game. I'll explain later.
The controls of this game are as basic as, bass. That's sick. I don't fucking know, all I'm trying to say is that they're simple. Left and right on the D-pad moves you left and right, the B button speeds you up, and then you jump with the A button. Oh yeah, and there are of course the power-ups. All 3 of them. Yeah, despite being one of the most iconic parts in the Mario games, the power-ups are just kind of there in the first game. All we have is the Super Mushroom, the Fire Flower, and the Superstar. Mushroom increases your size and gives you an extra hit, the Fire Flower allows you to shoot fireballs, and the Superstar makes you invincible. I don't really know what else I can say though. However, there is definitely an issue with how I think the power-ups are handled in this particular game that I will talk about in the gameplay segment. However, what will be talked about is how poorly these controls have aged. Yeah, I get the feeling that you probably saw this coming, but this bears repeating. This game may have controlled decently back in the day, but nowadays, this game's controls are about as fun to use as trying to parkour on rooftops while in a wheelchair. Mario 1 has some of the heaviest momentum I've ever dealt with in a platformer. When you're in levels that have simple jumps and are designed with rushing in mind, then the controls are completely tolerable. It's when you have to make precise jumps is when the momentum becomes a bitch. Also, the jumping does not feel responsive, leading to deaths where you run straight into enemies. In fact, this is one of the most common ways I have died in this game. These controls are so fucking clunky that I can only imagine how much worse they would have been with an ice level.
We are only in our 3rd section, and I'm already bashing dated elements. What a fantastic start.
The gameplay is also very simple. You collect coins while giving yourself a concussion for the power-ups, or getting yourself an extra life called a 1-up. You start out with 3 lives, and your goal is to basically get to the end while avoiding Koopas and Goombas and other things.
Sounds simple, right? Yes, it is. But then you have to deal with a bunch of design flaws, making the idea of beating this game way harder than it has to be. Now, I'm not gonna be a prick and complain about not being able to save in this game. That's like complaining that a movie from the 1930s is in black and white. That kind of criticism is fucking retarded and blatantly unfair. But there are things in this game that I would say are problems even for the game's time.
We'll start with the small things. If you game over, you go all the way back to the beginning, no matter how far you are into the game. Now you understand why I ended up using save states? Would it have really been impossible for them to at least start you from the beginning of the world? This is something that was done in the 3rd one. But to be charitable, maybe they weren't able to do it back in 85? I will try and give that the benefit of the doubt. But what I won't give the benefit of the doubt is the life system. You are simply given a way too limited amount of lives to work with. Yes, 3 lives for what the game becomes later on is a tiny amount.
You'd probably say that I'm just plain shit at this game, and you'd be right. But I think most average players in today's day and age would be shit at this game too. Or it just might be me.
Now, I would never say that I'm a master at video games, but I wouldn't say that I'm terrible at video games. At least I hope not. As an average player, you'd be surprised just how easy it is to run out of all 3 lives. The controls are what definitely makes you run out of lives, but it also takes quite a bit of effort to try and find and gain extra lives. In fact, too much effort. Sure, you can find hidden 1-ups in this game and collecting 100 coins will give you an extra life, but they are so much more infrequent compared to the rest of the series that you'd likely be spending more lives attempting to find more lives instead of just running through the level. Sure, you could try and explore, but that doesn't really help with the fact that you have a fucking time limit. Then the other big problem is how rare power-ups are in this game. I can guarantee that you will be spending most of this game with normal small one-hit kill Mario, and that's because power-ups are so fucking hard to find in this first game. There are 3 scenarios. 1, they will be in the level, but will either be very hard to find or guarded by so many enemies to the point where it's not worth it. 2, won't be in the level at all. Or 3, will be in the level and will be easy to get to. Unfortunately, scenarios 1 and 2 are the most common. I didn't even get a single power-up in World 8. That's not all. Fire Mario should ideally give you 2 hit points, but no. If you take damage as Fire Mario, you go back to Small Mario, and if you pick up a Fire Flower as Small Mario, you just become Big Mario. Fuck you. This is a point where I just do not care how old this game is. These are just parts of the game that I do consider to be massive design flaws. There are also other things I can complain about, like not being able to go back during the level, but things like that are so minute compared to the rest of the problems that I'm not gonna bother. Also, like the game over system, this could be another result of devs being limited with what they were able to do back then. Hell, I completely neglected to mention that this game was only created by 5 people, and it definitely makes the flaws feel a little bit more easy to forgive, I guess. Similarly to how the level design can also be forgiven for that. Kinda. Sorta. There's only 4 level themes in this game. Grass, underground, underwater, and castle. Obviously, I can't really bash the fact that there's only 4 level themes given the circumstances, but what I can say is that I do feel that the levels can have their cheap moments. More than half of the game is fine and all that, but World 8. Fuck me, World 8, particularly 8-2 and 3. They got so unfairly difficult that I had to resort to save stating past the beginning. Even 8-1 can be a bitch. Look how long this goes on for. It took me almost half an hour to finish World 8. I know that doesn't sound like much, but it's an eternity when you're looking at the same visuals and listening to the exact same music over and over again. But all in all, the level design is fine, just annoying to get through by the end. Boss fights, on the other hand, could just be described in one sentence. It's just Bowser. Literally, just Bowser. I won't be too harsh, given that this is one of the first instances of boss fights even existing, and at least unlike certain other games, they do take a slight amount of effort to beat. Kinda. I mean, you could just run under him, but still. But yeah, it's just Bowser, or his henchman disguised as Bowser. Or should I say the Great Koopa Turtle King? That name still sucks! The graphics are a more interesting topic for this game. Okay, not by much, but still. To be fair, this game must have looked mind-blowing back in the day, and it still looks pretty alright now. It's simple, easy on the eyes, colorful, and does a decent job with differentiating all 4 of the level themes from each other. It also runs at a good frame rate. Sure, there are some assets that are just copy and pasted and then slightly modified, like how the Goombas and mushrooms are the same base 2D sprite, so you will be seeing these looking extra samey, but this game's presentation is still alright. The soundtrack in this game is also alright. Composed by Koji Kondo, this just might be gaming's most iconic soundtrack of all time. Who the hell does not know the simple yet memorable or what about the unforgettable The other 2 tracks are also pretty memorable, but the first 2 are by far the most well-known. Personally, I do like this soundtrack, but I overall think that it's meh. And that's because I was spoiled with so many other phenomenal soundtracks over the years that it's just unfair. But this soundtrack still holds up well. It's a decent bop every once in a while.
But what's this? We are at the ending already! This game only took me an hour and a half to beat, so yeah. But all that I can really say is that you beat Bowser, the Great Koopa Turtle King, and you reach the princess with text hovering over just telling you that you did it. Really not much else to say, so On with the conclusion.
Super Mario Bros. For the NES is a game that I respect a lot more than I actually like. Make no mistake, this game is a classic. But I can't help but feel like the people who still actively believe that it's still one of the greatest games of all time are just nostalgia blind. Sure, this game was great at the time, but that was really the only time where it truly was great. No one has ever seen anything like this before, and this game did technically save the game industry, and platformers certainly wouldn't be the same without it. That being said, what I consider to be true great games are games that manage to be more than just great for the time. A true great game should be great at all times. This game has an iconic OST, simple yet memorable visuals, and starting platformers, while having poor platforming controls and some shitty design flaws. My attitude while playing this game went from this to this. Super Mario Bros. Is just one of those games where the legacy is greater than the game itself, but I am feeling generous, so I won't give this game that low of a score. On the scale of quality, I will give Super Mario Bros. A 6 out of 10. Give it a try.
So, that is it for our one Mario video this year. Like I said, I had to get my previous video done, so we ended up starting this late. But next year, we will be taking a look at the Japanese sequel, The Lost Levels. This was Max Drive you just watched. See you on the other side. Can't tell if that was cool or dorky.